My name is Serafina Blackwell, and for as long as I can remember, I've been invisible. Not in the literal sense, of course, but in the way that truly matters. Invisible to the people who were supposed to see me, to value me, to love me. I grew up in a world where power was measured in stock portfolios and corporate mergers, where my father's empire stretched across continents, and where I was nothing more than an inconvenient reminder of his one moment of weakness. You see, my father, Harrison Blackwell, built his fortune from the ground up. He's a titan in the financial world, the kind of man who can make or break economies with a single phone call. Forbes lists, Fortune 500, all of that. He's been there, done that, bought the magazine. But despite all his success, despite all his power and influence, there was one thing he could never control: me. I wasn't the son he wanted. I wasn't ruthless enough, ambitious enough, cold enough. I had this annoying habit of caring about people, of asking questions about ethics and morality in a world where the only thing that mattered was the bottom line. My mother died when I was 7, and after that, I became even more of a burden to him. He remarried within a year, a calculated move, of course, to a woman from old money who could elevate his social standing even further. Together, they had my half-brother, and just like that, I became obsolete. I spent most of my childhood in boarding schools across Europe, shuffled from one prestigious institution to another, always with the understanding that I was being prepared for a life of quiet obedience. I was to marry well, smile at charity galas, and never ever challenge the empire my father had built. That was my destiny, carefully mapped out by a man who couldn't even remember my birthday. But destiny, I learned, has a funny way of surprising you. I was 23 when everything changed. I had just graduated from Oxford with a degree in art history, something my father called utterly useless, during one of our rare phone conversations. I was living in a small flat in London, trying to figure out what to do with my life, when I received a letter. Not an email, not a text, but an actual letter, written on heavy cream paper with elegant calligraphy that seemed to shimmer in the light. The letter was an invitation to an art auction at a private estate outside the city. Normally, I wouldn't have been interested. I'd attended enough of these events with my father to know they were just thinly veiled networking opportunities for the wealthy elite. But something about this invitation felt different. The artwork being auctioned was from the Renaissance period, pieces that had been thought lost for centuries. As an art historian, I couldn't resist. The estate was magnificent, a sprawling Gothic mansion that seemed to emerge from the mist like something out of a fairy tale. As I walked through the iron gates, I felt a strange pull, as if the house itself was calling to me. The gardens were immaculate, filled with night-blooming flowers that released a heady, intoxicating scent into the cool evening air. I should have been nervous. I didn't know anyone here, didn't have my father's name to hide behind, but instead, I felt strangely at peace. The auction was held in the main gallery, a vast room with soaring ceilings and walls lined with paintings that probably cost more than most people earn in a lifetime. I found a seat near the back, content to observe, to lose myself in the beauty of the art and forget, for a few hours at least, about my complicated life. That's when I saw him. He was standing at the front of the room, partially obscured by shadows, but even from a distance, I could feel his presence. It was like a physical force, a weight in the air that made it hard to breathe. He was tall, impossibly so, with dark hair that fell to his shoulders and skin so pale it seemed to glow in the candlelight. But it was his eyes that caught me, amber, like molten gold, burning with an intensity that made my heart skip a beat. He turned, and for a moment, our gazes locked. Time seemed to stop. The room, the people, the auction, everything faded away until there was only him and me and this inexplicable connection that I couldn't understand. I felt heat rise to my cheeks, felt my pulse quicken in a way that was both terrifying and exhilarating. Then someone spoke to him, and the moment broke. He turned away, and I could breathe again. I tried to focus on the auction, but my eyes kept drifting back to him. He bid on several pieces, always with a casual elegance that suggested money was no object. When a particularly exquisite portrait of a Renaissance noblewoman came up for auction, he made a bid that silenced the entire room. £1,000,000, just like that. The auctioneer's gavel fell, and the painting was his. After the auction ended, I should have left. Every rational part of my brain told me to get in my car and drive back to London, to forget about the mysterious stranger with the golden eyes, but I didn't. Instead, I found myself wandering through the estate, drawn by that same inexplicable pull I'd felt earlier. I ended up in the garden, standing before a fountain carved with intricate designs that seemed to tell a story. The moon was full, casting silver light across the water, and for a moment, I felt completely alone in the world. Then I heard a voice behind me. "The fountain depicts the myth of Selene and Endymion," he said, his voice deep and rich, with an accent I couldn't quite place. "The moon goddess who fell in love with a mortal shepherd. She asked Zeus to grant him eternal sleep so that he would remain forever young and beautiful, and she could visit him each night." I turned, and there he was, standing just a few feet away. Up close, he was even more striking. His features were sharp, aristocratic, the kind of face you'd see in classical sculptures. But there was something otherworldly about him, something that made my instincts scream danger, even as every other part of me wanted to move closer. That's a rather selfish kind of love, don't you think? I replied, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. Putting someone to sleep forever just so you can visit them on your own terms, he smiled, and I saw a flash of something sharp, too sharp to be normal teeth. Perhaps, he acknowledged, moving closer, or perhaps it was the only way she could protect him from the cruelty of time, from the inevitable decay that comes with mortality. Sometimes, the most selfish acts are also the most loving. I should have been afraid. Every horror movie I'd ever seen, every cautionary tale I'd ever heard, told me to run, but I didn't. Instead, I found myself asking, "Who are you?" "My name is Demon Nightshade," he said, extending a hand. "And you are Seraphina Blackwell, daughter of Harrison Blackwell, the financial magnate who believes he can buy anything and anyone." I stared at him, my heart pounding. "How do you know who I am?" "I make it my business to know things," he replied, his amber eyes never leaving mine, "especially when those things involve people who interest me. And you, Seraphina, interest me very much." There was something in the way he said my name, rolling each syllable on his tongue like he was tasting it, that made my skin tingle. I should have been offended by his presumption, by the fact that he'd apparently been investigating me. But instead, I felt something else entirely, a thrill of excitement, of possibility, of something I couldn't even name. "Why?" I asked. "Why would I interest you?" He moved closer, so close I could feel the cold emanating from his body, could see the way the moonlight reflected in his eyes like they were made of actual gold. "Because you carry something ancient within you," he said soft, "something that calls to me, that resonates with what I am. You feel it too, don't you? This connection between us." I wanted to deny it, but I couldn't, because he was right. From the moment I'd seen him, I'd felt it. This inexplicable bond, like we were two pieces of a puzzle that had finally found each other. It was insane, impossible, and yet undeniably real. "What are you?" I whispered, even though part of me already knew the answer. "I think you know," he replied, his voice barely audible above the sound of the fountain. "I think you've always known, deep down, that there's more to this world than what you've been taught. I am Vampire, Seraphina. I have walked this earth for over 8 centuries, watching empires rise and fall, seeing humanity repeat the same mistakes over and over again. I have witnessed beauty and horror beyond your imagination, and in all that time, I have never met anyone like you." I should have laughed. I should have called him crazy and walked away, but I couldn't. Because as he spoke, something inside me recognized the truth of his words. It was like a door had been opened in my mind, revealing knowledge I didn't know I possessed. I could feel it now, this power thrumming beneath my skin, ancient and wild and utterly terrifying. "What's happening to me?" I asked, my voice shaking. Demon reached out, his cool fingers brushing my cheek, and I gasped at the sensation. It was like ice and fire at the same time, painful and pleasurable in equal measure. "You're awakening," he told me. "The blood that runs through your veins is not entirely human, Seraphina. You are descended from an ancient lineage, one that predates recorded history. Some call them witches, others call them the old blood. But whatever name you use, the truth remains the same. You have power within you, power that has been dormant until now." "That's impossible," I protested, even as red flames began to dance at my fingertips, responding to the surge of emotion coursing through me. I stared at my hands in shock, watching the fire play across my skin without burning me. "Is it?" Demon asked, his voice gentle. "Look at yourself, Seraphina. The evidence is right in front of you. You've always known you were different, haven't you? Always felt like you didn't quite fit in the world your father tried to force you into. Now you know why. He was right. God help me. He was right. I had always felt different, had always sensed there was something more lurking beneath the surface of my ordinary life. All those strange occurrences throughout my childhood, lights flickering when I was angry, objects moving when I was upset, the way animals seemed to sense something unusual about me, it all made sense now. "Why didn't my father tell me?" I asked, anger rising in my chest. "Why did he hide this from me?" Demon's expression darkened. "Because your father is a coward," he said bluntly. "Sorry, he recognized what you were when you were born, saw the potential within you, and it terrified him. He couldn't control it, couldn't buy it or manipulate it, so he did everything in his power to suppress it. He sent you away, isolated you, tried to convince you that you were nothing special, but he was wrong. You are extraordinary, Seraphina, and it's time you embraced that." I looked down at my hands, watching the flames dance and swirl. Part of me wanted to reject this, to cling to the familiar even if it meant living a lie, but a larger part, the part that had been waiting my entire life for this moment, wanted to embrace it. I wanted to know who I really was, what I was capable of. I wanted to step out of my father's shadow and claim my own destiny. "Teach me," I said, looking up at Demon. "If what you're saying is true, if I really do have this power, then teach me how to use it." Show me who I really am. Something flickered in his amber eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or maybe respect. Are you certain? He asked. This path, once chosen, cannot be undone. You will learn things that will change you forever. See truths that will shatter everything you thought you knew about the world. There is no going back, Seraphina. I don't want to go back, I replied firmly. I've spent my entire life being invisible, being controlled, being told I'm not good enough. I'm done with that. Whatever this is, whatever I am, I want to know. I need to know. Demon studied me for a long moment, and I had the strangest sensation that he was looking not just at me, but into me, seeing past all my defenses to the raw truth underneath. Finally, he nodded. Very well, he said, but understand this, the training will be difficult. You will face your deepest fears, confront the darkest parts of yourself. You may not like what you discover. Are you prepared for that? Yes, I said without hesitation, and I meant it. Whatever lay ahead, it had to be better than the half-life I'd been living, trapped between two worlds and belonging to neither. Then we begin tonight, Demon declared, extending his hand once more. Come with me. I took his hand, and the moment our skin touched, I felt a jolt of energy pass between us. It was like completing a circuit, like two forces that had been meant to merge finally coming together. The flames around my fingers flared brighter, and I saw answering darkness swirl around Demon's form, shadows that seemed to have a life of their own. He led me deeper into the estate, through corridors lined with portraits of people long dead, their painted eyes seeming to follow us as we passed. We descended a spiral staircase that went down, far below the house, until I was certain we must be underground. The air grew colder with each step, and I could feel the weight of centuries pressing down on us. Finally, we emerged into a vast chamber carved from living rock. Candles floated in the air, their flames casting dancing shadows on the walls, and I could see intricate symbols etched into the stone, glowing with a faint golden light. In the center of the room was a circle, and as we stepped into it, I felt the power in the air intensify until it was almost unbearable. This is where you will learn, Demon explained, releasing my hand and moving to the edge of the circle. And this chamber has been used for magical training for thousands of years. The symbols you see are wards, protections to ensure that whatever power is unleashed here cannot escape and cause harm. You are safe to experiment, to push your limits without fear of consequences. I turned slowly, taking it all in. The chamber felt alive, pulsing with energy that resonated with something deep inside me. What do? I asked. But first, you must learn to control the power within you, Demon instructed, his voice taking on a tone of authority I hadn't heard before. Right now, it responds to your emotions, flaring when you're angry or afraid. But true mastery comes from discipline, from the ability to call upon your power at will and shape it to your purpose. Close your eyes. I did as he said, shutting out the visual distractions of the chamber and focusing inward. At first, there was nothing, just the sound of my own breathing and the distant drip of water somewhere in the darkness. But then, slowly, I began to feel it, a warmth in my chest, like a coal that had been smoldering for years, waiting for someone to fan it into flame. Do you feel it? Demon's voice came from somewhere to my left. That warmth, that energy, that is your power, your birthright. Now, reach for it, not with your hands, but with your will. Command it to respond. I focused on the warmth, imagining it as something tangible, something I could grasp and shape. At first, nothing happened, and I felt frustration beginning to build. But then Demon spoke again, his voice calm and steady. Control before command, he said, and I recognized the phrase from somewhere deep in my memory, like an echo of something I'd heard in a dream. Always, control before command. You cannot master what you do not first understand. Feel the power, learn its rhythms, its patterns. Only then can you direct it. I took a deep breath and tried again, but this time, instead of trying to force the power to obey me, I simply observed it. I felt its ebb and flow, the way it surged with each beat of my heart, the way it responded to my thoughts and emotions. It was like learning a new language, understanding the grammar and syntax of something that had always been there, but had never made sense before. Gradually, I began to sense a pattern. The power wasn't chaotic or random. It had structure, rules, a logic all its own. And once I understood that, once I stopped fighting it and started working with it, everything changed. The warmth in my chest grew stronger, brighter, and I could feel it spreading through my body, filling me with energy that made me feel more alive than I ever had before. Open your eyes, Demon commanded, and when I did, I gasped. The entire chamber was filled with red light, emanating from me, from every pore of my body. Flames danced along my arms, across my shoulders, through my hair, but they didn't burn. Instead, they felt natural, like they were part of me, an extension of my will made visible. Excellent, Demon praised, and I could hear genuine approval in his voice. Now, shape it. Give the power form and purpose. Imagine what you want it to become, and it will obey. I focused, envisioning the flames coalescing, taking shape. Slowly, they began to respond, flowing together to form a sphere that hovered above my outstretched hand. It was beautiful, mesmerizing, this ball of crimson fire that pulsed in time with my heartbeat. I could feel the power contained within it, enormous and barely restrained, waiting for my command. What you're holding now could level this entire estate, Demon informed me matter-of-factly, but you won't let it. Because you are in control. You decide what happens next. That is the true nature of power, Seraphina. Not the ability to destroy, but the ability to choose. Remember that. His words resonated deeply within me, and I realized this was the lesson my father had never learned. He had spent his entire life accumulating power, but he had never truly controlled it. His power controlled him, drove him, consumed him until there was nothing left but ambition and greed. I wouldn't make that mistake. I would be different. I closed my hand, and the sphere of flame dissipated, the energy flowing back into me and settling once more in that warm space in my chest. I felt exhausted but exhilarated, like I'd just run a marathon and won. That was incredible, I breathed, turning to face Demon. I never imagined, I felt powerful, but this is only the beginning, he interrupted, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. What you've accomplished tonight, most practitioners spend years trying to achieve. Your power is raw but immense, Seraphina. With proper training, there's no limit to what you could accomplish. Over the following weeks, I threw myself into the training with an intensity that surprised even Demon. Every night, I would return to the estate, descend into that underground chamber, and push myself to new limits. I learned to manipulate not just fire, but all the elements: water, earth, air, each responding to my will in different ways. I learned to sense the energy in living things, to read the currents of power that flowed through the world, invisible to normal human perception. But more than that, I learned about myself. With each lesson, each challenge Demon set before me, I discovered reserves of strength and determination I never knew I possessed. The shy, invisible girl my father had tried to mold me into faded away, replaced by someone stronger, more confident, more complete. I was becoming who I was always meant to be. Demon was patient but demanding, pushing me to exceed what I thought were my limits. Sometimes the training was grueling, leaving me physically and mentally exhausted. But he was always there, guiding me, supporting me, never letting me give up on myself. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, our relationship began to shift from teacher and student to something deeper, something neither of us had anticipated. I found myself looking forward, not just to the lessons, but to being in his presence. I loved the way his eyes would light up when I successfully mastered a new technique, the rare smile that would cross his face when I surprised him with my progress. We would talk for hours after training, sitting in his library surrounded by books that dated back centuries, discussing philosophy and history and the nature of existence itself. He told me about his life, about the 800 years he'd lived, the things he'd seen and done. He spoke of empires that had risen and fallen, of plagues and wars and revolution. He'd known Leonardo da Vinci, had watched the construction of Notre Dame, had witnessed the fall of Constantinople. The weight of that history should have made him seem alien, impossible to relate to, but instead, it gave me a glimpse into the person he'd become, complex, nuanced, carrying both regret and wisdom. He spoke of the loneliness too, the crushing isolation of watching everyone you care about age and die while you remain unchanging. He'd learned to keep his distance from humanity, to view mortals as ephemeral creatures not worth forming attachments to. But something about me had broken through those carefully constructed walls, had made him feel things he thought he'd forgotten how to feel. Why me? I asked him one night, after a particularly intense training session. We were sitting in his study, the fire crackling in the hearth, glasses of wine in our hands. Of all the people you must have met in 8 centuries, why am I the one who interests you? Demon was quiet for a long moment, staring into the flames with an expression I couldn't read. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. Because you remind me of who I was, he said. Before I became this, I was once like you, Seraphina, young, idealistic, full of hope for the future. I believed in love and honor and all those beautiful, foolish things that make life worth living. Then I was turned, and I watched as centuries of cynicism and cruelty slowly eroded those beliefs until I couldn't remember why I'd valued them in the first place. He turned to look at me, and I saw something in his amber eyes that made my heart ache. Vulnerability, longing, hope. But when I'm with you, he continued, I remember, you make me want to be better than I am, to believe that maybe, just maybe, there's still a chance for redemption. You make me feel human again, even though I haven't been human for 800 years. I didn't know what to say. The raw honesty in his words stripped away all my defense, left me feeling exposed and seen in a way I'd never experienced before. Without thinking, I reached out and took his hand, lacing my fingers through his. His skin was cool against mine, but the touch sent warmth flooding through my entire body. You're not a monster, I said firmly. I don't care what you've done, what you think you are. The person who has spent weeks patiently teaching me, who has never tried to take advantage of my ignorance or inexperience, who looks at me like I'm something precious and rare, that person is not a monster. That person is good. Something shifted in his expression, and suddenly he was closer. So close I could feel his breath on my face, could see every detail of his impossibly perfect features. Serafina, he whispered, my name a prayer on his lips. If you knew the things I've done, the blood on my hands— I don't care, I interrupted, surprised by the fierceness in my own voice. I don't care about your past. I care about who you are now, who you're choosing to be. And right now, you're the only person in my entire life who has ever truly seen me, who has ever believed I could be more than what I was born to be. That means everything to me. For a moment, we just stared at each other, the air between us charged with tension and possibility. Then Demon moved, his hand coming up to cup my face, his thumb brushing across my cheekbone with infinite gentleness. You are remarkable, he murmured. And you are going to change everything. Then he kissed me, and the world disappeared. It was nothing like I'd imagined a first kiss would be. There was nothing tentative or uncertain about it. It was intense, consuming, like two forces of nature colliding and creating something entirely new. I felt his power surge to meet mine, darkness and light intertwining until I couldn't tell where he ended and I began. The flames rose around us, dancing in spirals of red and gold, responding to the electricity crackling between us. When we finally broke apart, both breathless, I realized that everything had changed. This was no longer just about training or discovering my powers. This was about something far more profound, far more dangerous. I was falling in love with him. And from the way he was looking at me, with wonder and hunger, and something that looked suspiciously like hope, I knew he felt it too. But our private world couldn't last forever. Reality has a way of intruding, no matter how much you try to keep it at bay. And my reality came crashing down 3 weeks after that first kiss, in the form of my father. I'd gone back to my flat in London to collect some things. I'd been spending more and more time at Demon's estate, and I needed clothes, books, the mundane necessities of life. I should have been more careful, should have realized that my long absences wouldn't go unnoticed. But I was drunk on love and power, convinced that nothing could touch me. I was wrong. I opened the door to my flat and immediately knew something was wrong. The air felt different, charged with hostility and barely contained rage. I stepped inside cautiously, my power rising instinctively in response to the threat, and that's when I saw them. My father stood in the center of my living room, flanked by 4 men in expensive suits who I recognized as his top executives. But these weren't just businessmen. I could sense the weapons they carried, concealed beneath their tailored jackets. My father had brought armed guards to confront his own daughter. "Hello, Serafina," my father said, his voice cold and clipped. "We need to talk." "About what?" I asked, not moving from the doorway. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to run, but I refused to show fear. Not anymore. "About this ridiculous fantasy you've been living," he replied, pulling out his phone and swiping through it before turning the screen toward me. I saw pictures. Me entering Demon's estate, me in the garden, me through the windows of his study. My father had been having me followed, surveilled like some kind of criminal. "You've been investigating me?" I asked, outrage overriding caution. "You have no right." "I have every right," my father thundered, his composure cracking. "You are my daughter, my property, and I will not stand by and watch you throw your life away on some charlatan who has convinced you that you're special, that you have power. It's pathetic." "I do have power," I said quietly, and I let the flames appear, dancing along my fingertips in a clear demonstration. "I am special. I'm everything you were always afraid I would become." My father's face went white, then red with rage. "Put that away," he hissed. "Do you have any idea how dangerous this is? How much damage you could do if anyone found out what you are?" "What I am," I repeated, my anger rising to match his. "And what exactly am I, father? Tell me, since you seem to know so much about it. Tell me why you never bothered to explain that I come from a lineage of witches, that I have power in my blood that you've been suppressing my entire life." For a moment, he looked genuinely shocked that I knew. Then his expression hardened. "It was for your own good," he said. "That power is a curse, Serafina. It destroyed your mother, consumed her until there was nothing left. I wasn't going to let it happen to you, too." This was new information. A piece of the puzzle I hadn't known was missing. "My mother," I said slowly. "She had the same abilities. She had something," my father admitted grudgingly, "but she couldn't control it. It drove her mad, made her dangerous. She tried to hurt you once. Did you know that? You were just a baby, and she looked at you with those wild eyes, and I saw her hands start to glow with that same cursed fire. I had to put her in an institution, had to tell everyone she died to protect the family name, and I swore that day that I would never let the same thing happen to you. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. My mother wasn't dead, or at least, she hadn't been when I was young. My father had locked her away, hidden her like she was something shameful. Where is she?" I demanded. Where is my mother? She's gone, he said flatly. She died 5 years ago. I made sure you were out of the country when it happened. Didn't want you getting any ideas about trying to see her. It was a mercy, really. Death was a release from what she'd become. The flames around my hands blazed brighter, responding to the fury building inside me. You kept her from me, I said, my voice shaking with rage. You let me believe she was dead. Let me grow up without a mother, all because you were too much of a coward to deal with what she was, what we are. I protected you, my father shouted. I kept you safe, kept you hidden from people who would want to exploit your abilities or destroy you out of fear. And this is how you repay me, by running off with some vampire who's probably planning to use you for his own purposes. Demon isn't using me, I retorted. He's teaching me, helping me understand who I am. He's shown me more love and respect in a few weeks than you have in my entire life. My father's expression turned calculating, and I saw him exchange glances with his men. That's what you think, he said. But I know his type. I've dealt with creatures like him before. They're parasites. Seraphina, feeding off humans, manipulating them for their own amusement. He doesn't care about you. He just wants to control you, to use your power for whatever scheme he's concocting. You're wrong, I said firmly. And even if you weren't, I'd rather be used by someone who sees my worth than continue to be invisible to my own father. I'm not giving you a choice, my father declared, and suddenly his men were moving, spreading out to block my exits. You're coming with me, Seraphina, back to America, where I can keep an eye on you. I've already arranged for specialists who deal with your condition, therapists, doctors, people who can help suppress these dangerous abilities. With the right treatment, we can make you normal again. I don't want to be normal, I screamed, and the flames exploded outward, forming a barrier between me and my father's men. They stumbled backward, reaching for their weapons, but I was faster. I thrust my hands forward, and serpents of red fire surged from the floor, coiling around their legs, immobilizing them without actually burning them. The display of power was instinctive, born from weeks of training with Demon. I could hear his voice in my head, steady and sure. Control before command. Always control before command. The flames responded to my will, holding the men in place but not harming them, despite how much I wanted to lash out, to hurt them the way they wanted to hurt me. My father stared at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw fear in his eyes. Real, genuine fear. Seraphina, he said, his voice careful now, like he was talking to a wild animal. You need to stop this. You're not thinking clearly. That creature has poisoned your mind. Stop calling him that, I snapped. Demon has done nothing but respect me, teach me, show me who I really am. You're the one who's been lying to me my entire life, treating me like I'm broken, like I'm something to be fixed or hidden away. Well, I'm done being ashamed of who I am. I'm done letting you control my life. I released the men from the fire serpents and moved toward the door, keeping my power at the ready in case any of them tried to stop me. My father took a step forward, and I saw something in his face that might have been regret, or maybe just calculation. If you walk out that door, he said quietly, you're no longer my daughter. I'll cut you off completely. No money, no family name, nothing. You'll be on your own. I paused at the threshold and looked back at him. This man who had given me life but had never really given me love. I've always been on my own, I told him. The only difference now is that I finally understand my own worth. Goodbye, father. I walked out, and I didn't look back. I went straight to Demon's estate, bursting through the doors with tears streaming down my face and power crackling around me like electricity. He was there immediately, pulling me into his arms, letting me sob against his chest while he stroked my hair and murmured soothing words I couldn't quite make out. When I finally calmed down enough to talk, I told him everything, about my father's threats, about my mother, about the confrontation and the ultimatum. Through it all, Demon listened without interrupting, his amber eyes never leaving my face. I'm sorry, he said when I finished. Ford, I'm sorry you had to face that alone. I should have been there to protect you. You couldn't have known, I replied, wiping my eyes. And besides, I didn't need protecting. I handled it myself. I'm not that helpless girl anymore. No, he agreed, a hint of pride in his voice. You're not. You're strong, Seraphina, stronger than you know. But your father won't give up easily. Men like him don't accept losing control. I know, I admitted, which is why I think I'm ready for the next step. You've talked about it before, about the ritual that could bind us together, make me like you. I want to do it, Demon. I want to be with you, truly be with you, for as long as we both shall live. Demon pulled back, his hands gripping my shoulders as he searched my face intently. Seraphina, do you understand what you're asking? The transformation isn't just about gaining immortality or greater power. It will change you fundamentally, alter the very essence of who you are. There's no going back from this, no second chances. I understand, I said firmly. I've thought about nothing else for weeks. My human life is over anyway. My father has made sure of that. And even if he hadn't, I don't want that life. I don't want to grow old and die while you remain unchanging. I don't want to spend decades watching you pull away from me because you know that eventually I'll be gone. I want forever, demon. I want it with you. Something shifted in his expression. Hope, fear, love, all tangled together in a way that made him look more human than I'd ever seen. The ritual is dangerous, he warned. It requires merging your power with mine, intertwining our essences in a way that creates something entirely new. Neither fully vampire nor fully witch, but a fusion of both. It's never been attempted before. Not in all the centuries I've lived. We could both die in the attempt. Then we die together, I said simply. But I believe in us, demon. I believe that what we have is strong enough to survive anything. Please, let me choose this. Let me choose you. For a long moment, he just looked at me, and I could see the internal battle raging behind his eyes. Then, slowly, he nodded. 3 days, he said. That's how long it will take to prepare. The ritual must be performed under a full moon, with the proper protections in place. If we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. Those 3 days passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. Demon taught me the final lessons I would need, the deepest secrets of both vampiric and magical power. He showed me the ritual chamber, even deeper than the training room, carved with symbols so old and complex they seemed to pulse with their own life. He explained what would happen, how our blood would mix, how our powers would merge, how we would essentially die and be reborn as something new. I should have been terrified, but I wasn't. I felt calm, centered, certain that this was the right path. Every choice I'd made since meeting Demon had led me to this moment, and I was ready to embrace whatever came next. On the night of the full moon, we descended into the ritual chamber. Demon had prepared everything perfectly. Candles arranged in intricate patterns, ceremonial daggers laid out on an altar, ancient texts opened to the correct pages. The air thrummed with power, both his and mine, mingling and dancing around each other like old friends. "Are you ready?" he asked, taking my hands in his. "I've never been more ready for anything in my life," I replied honestly. We began the ritual, speaking words in languages long dead, calling upon forces that predated human civilization. I felt my power rise, felt it reach out and intertwine with Demon's darkness, creating spirals of crimson and black that filled the chamber. He took the ceremonial dagger and made a cut across his palm, then did the same to mine. When our hands clasped together, our blood mingling, I felt a surge of energy so intense it drove me to my knees. Demon was there immediately, holding me up, his own body shaking with the force of what we'd unleashed. I could feel him inside me, not just physically, but spiritually, emotionally. Every thought, every memory, every feeling he'd ever experienced flooded into my consciousness. 800 years of life poured into my mind in a single instant. I saw him as a young man, barely 20, full of dreams and passion. I felt his horror when he was turned against his will, the anguish of watching his mortal family age and die while he remained frozen in time. I experienced his centuries of loneliness, of moving through the world like a ghost, never connecting, never caring. And I felt the moment he first saw me, the shock of recognition, the sudden, overwhelming hope that maybe, just maybe, he could finally feel something again. At the same time, I felt him experiencing my life, my lonely childhood, my desperate attempts to win my father's love, my pain at being rejected over and over again. He felt my awakening, the joy and terror of discovering my power, and the overwhelming love I'd developed for him. We were sharing everything, holding nothing back, and it was terrifying and beautiful in equal measure. The energy built higher and higher, until I was sure we would both simply disintegrate from the intensity of it. Then, just when I thought I couldn't take anymore, something inside me shifted. I felt a new sensation, something that was neither my power nor demons, but a fusion of both, a perfect balance of light and darkness, creation and destruction, life and death. I opened my eyes and saw that Demon's amber gaze had taken on a crimson glow that matched my own. We were changing, transforming, becoming something that had never existed before. The pain was excruciating, like every cell in my body was being torn apart and reassembled. I screamed, and Demon's cry joined mine, our voices mingling into a single note that echoed through the chamber. Then, suddenly, it was over. The energy dissipated, the pain vanished, and we collapsed together on the cold stone floor, gasping for breath. For a long moment, neither of us moved, too exhausted and overwhelmed to do anything but lie there in each other's arms. Finally, Demon stirred. "Seraphina," he whispered, his voice filled with awe. "Look at yourself." I sat up slowly and looked down at my hands. They were glowing softly, emanating a light that was both warm and cool, red and silver intertwined. I could feel the power coursing through me, so much stronger than before, but completely under my control. It was like I'd been operating at half capacity my entire life, and now, finally, I was whole. I looked at Demon and saw similar changes in him. His skin, while still pale, had taken on a warmer tone. His eyes still glowed amber, but now there were flecks of red dancing through them. He looked more alive than I'd ever seen him, less like an animated corpse and more like a being of pure vitality. "We did it," I breathed, reaching up to touch his face. "We actually did it." "We did," he confirmed, covering my hand with his. "You are magnificent, Seraphina. We are magnificent, neither vampire nor witch, but something entirely new, something powerful enough to change the world." We made our way back up to the main house as dawn approached, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the sunlight. Whatever we'd become, it transcended the traditional limitations of both our ancestral natures. We stood together at the windows, watching the sun rise over the estate, and I felt a peace I'd never known before. But our peace was short-lived. My father, true to Demon's prediction, hadn't given up. 2 days after the ritual, his men came again, not to my flat this time, but directly to Demon's estate. They came in force, dozens of them, armed with weapons both conventional and magical. My father had clearly done his research, had hired specialists who knew how to deal with supernatural threats. We felt them approaching long before they arrived, our enhanced senses picking up their presence miles away. Demon and I stood together at the entrance to the estate, watching them come up the long drive, an army of suits and soldiers led by my father himself. "Last chance, Seraphina," my father called out when they were close enough. "Come with me now, and I'll forgive this whole sordid affair. We can get you the help you need, make you normal again." I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. After everything I'd been through, everything I'd become, he still thought he could control me with threats and promises. "I am normal," I called back. "This is who I was always meant to be. I'm sorry you can't accept that, but your approval doesn't define me anymore." "Then you leave me no choice," my father declared, and his men began to advance, weapons raised. What happened next felt almost like a dance. Demon and I moved in perfect synchrony, our merged powers responding to our combined will. Red flames erupted from the ground, forming a barrier between us and the approaching force. But these weren't the same flames I'd wielded before. They were infused with Demon's vampiric energy, giving them a dark, smoky quality that made them seem alive, almost sentient. The men tried to breach the barrier, but every time they got close, the flames would surge forward, driving them back without actually harming them. I was in complete control, using just enough force to deter them but not to injure. Because despite everything, despite all the pain my father had caused me, I didn't want anyone to die today. "Stop this!" my father shouted, his carefully maintained composure finally cracking. "You don't understand what you're dealing with. That creature has corrupted you, turned you into something unnatural." "I understand perfectly," I replied, and my voice rang out clear and strong across the ground. "I understand that you're terrified of anything you can't control, that you'd rather see me broken and obedient than strong and free. But I'm done living my life according to your fears, Father. I'm done being invisible." I raised my hands, and the flames rose higher, forming shapes in the air, dragons and phoenixes, serpents and wolves, all dancing and weaving in an intricate pattern that was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. The display was meant to demonstrate not just my power, but my control, my artistry. This wasn't the work of someone consumed by darkness or driven mad by power. This was the work of someone who had finally found her true self. Even the hardened mercenaries my father had hired seemed impressed, lowering their weapons slightly as they watched the spectacular show. But my father himself remained unmoved, his face twisted with rage and what might have been grief. "If you won't come willingly," he said, his voice cold, "then I'll take you by force. Subdue them both. Use whatever means necessary." The men hesitated, clearly uncertain about attacking someone who could wield such power. But they were professionals, bound by contracts and money, and after a moment, they began to move forward again, this time with clear intent to harm. That's when Demon stepped forward, his own power flaring to life around him. Shadows peeled away from the ground, forming tendrils that moved with predatory grace. Where my flames were light and color, his shadows were depth and void, and together, they created a display that was breathtaking in its complexity. "I have lived for 8 centuries, Demon's voice rang out, carrying an authority that made even the most hardened mercenaries pause. "I have watched empires fall, seen wars that would make your modern conflicts look like children's games. I have power beyond your comprehension, and I could end every one of you with a thought. But I won't. Do you know why?" No one answered, but everyone was listening, transfixed by the combination of his words and the swirling display of power around us. "Because Seraphina taught me that true strength isn't about domination or destruction," Demon continued, his amber-red eyes sweeping across the gathered men. "It's about choice, about having the power to destroy, but choosing to create instead, about being capable of terrible violence, but choosing compassion. That is what makes us more than monsters, more than animals driven by base instinct." He moved closer to me, and our powers merged even more thoroughly. thoroughly, creating a vortex of light and shadow that filled the entire courtyard. "We are offering you all a choice," he said. "Leave now, peacefully, and we will let this entire incident go, or continue this attack and discover exactly what we're capable of when pushed to defend ourselves. Choose wisely." For a long moment, no one moved. Then one by one, the mercenaries began to lower their weapons. They were professionals, yes, but they weren't suicidal. Even my father's considerable wealth wasn't worth dying for. And it was clear to everyone present that Demon and I could follow through on his implicit threat if we chose to. My father stood alone, his small army deserting him, and for the first time in my life, I saw him as he truly was. Not a titan of industry, not a powerful magnate, but just a scared old man who had built his entire identity on control and was falling apart now that he'd encountered something he couldn't manipulate or buy. "You'll regret this," he said, his voice shaking with impotent rage. "Both of you. I'll use every resource I have, every connection, every dollar, to bring you down. You haven't heard the last of me." "Perhaps not," I replied, my voice gentler now that the threat had passed. "But I'm not afraid of you anymore, Father. I'm not afraid of anything. I finally know who I am, what I'm capable of, and no threat you make can take that away from me. I'm sorry we couldn't have a different kind of relationship. I'm sorry you couldn't see me for who I really am, but that's your loss, not mine." I saw something flicker in his eyes then, regret, maybe, or recognition of what he'd thrown away in his stubborn insistence on control. But it was too late for apologies, too late for reconciliation. Some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. He turned and walked away, his shoulders slumped in defeat, and I watched him go without sadness or anger, just acceptance. This was how our story ended, not with reconciliation or understanding, but with me finally stepping out of his shadow and into my own light. When the last of his men had disappeared down the drive, I let the flames dissipate, feeling suddenly exhausted. Demon wrapped his arms around me, and I leaned into him, grateful for his strength, for his presence, for everything he'd helped me become. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. "I am," I replied, and I was surprised to realize it was true. Despite everything, the confrontation, the rejection, the final severing of ties with my father, I felt okay, more than okay. I felt free. For the first time in my life, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, with exactly who I'm supposed to be with. That's enough. We stood there for a long time, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson, and I thought about everything that had led me to this moment: the lonely childhood, the desperate search for identity, the discovery of my power, the love I'd found in the most unexpected place. It had all been necessary, every joy and every pain, to bring me to this point where I could finally understand who I was meant to be. I wasn't human anymore, not entirely, but I wasn't fully vampire either. I was something new, something unique, a perfect fusion of light and darkness, creation and destruction, mortality and eternity. I was Seraphina Blackwell Nightshade, and I was magnificent. The weeks that followed were a revelation in every sense of the word. Demon and I explored the full extent of our merged abilities, discovering new powers neither of us had possessed individually. I could walk in sunlight without burning, could consume normal food even though I no longer needed it for sustenance. I retained my magical abilities but enhanced by vampiric strength and speed. Demon, conversely, found that my magic had tempered some of his more monstrous aspects. He no longer needed to kill to feed, could subsist on small amounts of blood mixed with the life force energy I could now generate and share with him. We were something unprecedented, and we both knew that our existence would change everything. The supernatural world, which had always been divided between different factions, vampires, witches, werewolves, and countless others, would have to reckon with what we represented, proof that the boundaries between their kinds weren't as fixed as they'd believed, that fusion and cooperation were possible, but that was a challenge for another day. For now, we were content to exist in our private sanctuary, learning about each other, about ourselves, about the vast potential of what we'd become. Demon taught me about the intricate politics of the vampire world, the ancient houses and bloodlines that governed their society. I shared with him the lore of my magical heritage, the traditions and rituals that my father had tried so hard to suppress. Together, we began to envision a future, not just for ourselves, but for others like us. Others who didn't fit neatly into the categories society tried to force upon them. Others who carried power they didn't understand, who felt like outsiders in their own lives. We could help them, teach them, create a community where strength and difference were celebrated rather than feared. It was an ambitious dream, perhaps even naive, but we had eternity to work toward it, and more importantly, we had each other. That was enough. That would always be enough. One evening, about a month after my father's failed attack, Demon and I stood on the balcony of our estate, looking out over the city lights twinkling in the distance. The moon was full again, casting silver light across the ground, and I felt a contentment so profound it almost hurt. Do you ever regret it? Demon asked suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. Giving up your humanity? Choosing this life? I turned to look at him, this being who had become my everything, and smiled. Not for a single second, I replied honestly. My humanity was never mine to begin with. It was defined by other people, my father, society, expectations I never agreed to. This, what I am now, what we are together, this is the first time I've ever truly been myself. How could I regret that? He pulled me close, pressing a kiss to my forehead, and I felt the familiar thrill of our powers resonating with each other, harmonizing in a way that would never grow old. I love you, he said simply. In 800 years, I never thought I'd be able to say those words again and mean them. Thank you for giving that back to me. I love you too, I replied. Thank you for seeing me when everyone else looked through me. Thank you for showing me who I really am. Thank you for choosing me. Always, he promised, for eternity. And standing there in the moonlight, wrapped in each other's arms, our powers dancing around us in spirals of red and black, light and shadow, I knew he meant it. This was forever. This was home. This was everything I'd been searching for my entire life without even knowing it. My name is Seraphina Blackwell Nightshade. I am a daughter rejected by her father, a student who became a master, a mortal who chose immortality, a woman who found love in the darkest of places. I am witch and vampire, human and monster, light and shadow, all at once and none completely. I am power and choice and consequence. I am exactly who I was always meant to be. And my story, our story, is just beginning. The future stretches before us, infinite and unknowable, filled with challenges and wonders we can't yet imagine. But whatever comes, we'll face it together, Demon and I, two souls who found each other across centuries and impossibilities, who chose to merge not just our powers but our very essences, creating something entirely new in the process. We stand at the dawn of a new age, guardians of a threshold between worlds. We are proof that the old divisions don't have to define us, that we can choose to be more than what we were born to be. We are hope and possibility and change incarnate, and we are not afraid. The moon rises higher, the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky, and somewhere in the city below, people go about their ordinary lives, never knowing that something extraordinary exists just beyond their perception. They don't know about the magic that thrums beneath the surface of reality, about the ancient powers that walk among them, about the thin line between the world they know and the world we inhabit. They don't know about us, but they will. Someday, when the time is right, when humanity is ready to accept that there's more to existence than what they can see and touch and measure, we'll step out of the shadows. We'll show them that magic is real, that the old stories contain more truth than they ever suspected, that the universe is far stranger and more wonderful than they ever imagined. Until then, we wait, we learn, we grow stronger, and we love each other with an intensity that transcends time and death and all the petty concerns of mortal existence. This is my truth. This is my story. This is my choice. And I would make it again, 1,000 times over, in every lifetime, in every reality, in every possible version of existence, because some bonds are meant to be forged. Some love is meant to be eternal. Some choices are meant to change everything. And ours did. My name is Seraphina Blackwell Nightshade, and I am free. The days that followed that first night of training were a blur of sensation and discovery. I would wake up in my small London flat, go through the motions of my ordinary life, buying groceries, returning library books, pretending to be just another young woman navigating her 20s, but all the while, I was counting down the hours until I could return to Demon's estate, until I could step back into that underground chamber and unleash the power that had been sleeping inside me for so long. The transformation wasn't just physical or magical, it was psychological, emotional, spiritual. Every lesson Demon taught me stripped away another layer of the person I'd been forced to become, revealing the person I'd always been underneath. I was discovering parts of myself I never knew existed, capabilities I never imagined having, and with each discovery came a growing sense of rightness, of finally being aligned with my true nature. One evening, about 2 weeks into my training, Demon took me to a different part of the estate, a conservatory filled with exotic plants from every corner of the world. The air was heavy with humidity and the scent of night-blooming flowers. Moonlight streamed through the glass ceiling, casting everything in shades of silver and shadow. Your power isn't just about destruction or defense, Demon explained, leading me to a withered rose bush in the corner. Magic, at its core, is about transformation, about changing the fundamental nature of things. Life, death, growth, decay. These are all aspects of the same force, and you can learn to manipulate them all. He placed my hand on the dying bush, and I felt the faint pulse of life still struggling within it, weak but persistent. Feel it, he instructed. Feel the life force, the energy that animates all living things. Now, Channel your power into it, not to burn or destroy, but to nurture, to strengthen, to transform. I closed my eyes and focused, reaching out with that inner sense I was still learning to trust. I could feel the rosebush's exhaustion, could sense where its roots had been damaged, where disease had taken hold. Carefully, tentatively, I let my power flow into it, imagining red light spreading through the plant like healing warmth. At first, nothing happened. Then, gradually, I felt the plant respond. The weak pulse of life grew stronger, steadier. I opened my eyes and watched in amazement as new growth emerged from dead wood, bright green shoots unfurling, buds forming and opening into roses of the deepest crimson I'd ever seen. Within minutes, the entire bush had transformed from dying to thriving, more beautiful than it had probably ever been. I stared at my hands, at the roses, at Demon's proud smile. "I did that," I whispered, awe coloring my voice. "I brought it back to life." "You did," he confirmed. "And that, Seraphina, is the true nature of your power. Yes, you can destroy when necessary, but you can also create, heal, transform. The choice is always yours." That's what makes you different from those who are consumed by their power. You understand that with great ability comes great responsibility, and you embrace that rather than running from it. Those words stayed with me, became a kind of mantra I would repeat to myself during the more difficult training sessions. Because as beautiful and empowering as discovering my abilities was, it wasn't always easy. There were moments of frustration when I couldn't quite grasp a concept Demon was trying to teach me, times when my control would slip and I'd accidentally scorch a piece of furniture or set off every fire alarm in the estate. But Demon never lost patience with me, never made me feel inadequate or stupid. He had, after all, 8 centuries of experience to draw on. He understood better than anyone that mastery doesn't come overnight. Instead, he would simply smile that enigmatic smile of his and say, "Again, we'll try again until you get it right. We have all the time in the world." And we did, or so I thought then. Time felt infinite in those early days, like we existed in a bubble outside the normal flow of hours and days. I was so focused on my training, so caught up in this new world Demon had opened up to me, that I barely thought about my father, my old life, the consequences that might be building in the background. But reality, as I said before, has a way of catching up with you. And my reality was about to collide with my new life in ways I couldn't have predicted. It started with small things, a sense of being watched when I was out in public, the feeling that someone was following me. I told myself I was being paranoid, that it was just residual anxiety from years of feeling invisible and unwanted. But the feeling persisted, growing stronger with each passing day. Then came the phone calls. My father had always been sparse with communication, preferring to relay messages through assistants and lawyers rather than speak to me directly. But suddenly, he was calling multiple times a day, leaving increasingly agitated voicemails demanding to know where I was, what I was doing, who I was spending time with. The concern in his voice was jarringly out of character. In 23 years, he'd never seemed particularly interested in my whereabouts or well-being. I ignored the calls, deleted the voicemails without listening to most of them. I was done seeking his approval, done letting his opinion of me dictate my choices. I had found something real, something meaningful, and I wasn't going to let him take it away from me. But I should have paid more attention. I should have recognized the warning signs for what they were. Because my father was not a man who accepted losing control gracefully, and he had resources I'd forgotten to factor into my calculation. The breaking point came on a Tuesday afternoon. I had just finished a morning training session with Demon. We'd been working on combining elemental manipulation with physical combat, a challenging synthesis that required me to maintain focus on multiple things simultaneously. And I'd returned to my flat to shower and change before heading back for the evening lesson. I should have sensed something was wrong the moment I turned onto my street. The air felt charged, electric with tension, but I was tired and distracted, my mind still half-focused on the techniques Demon had been teaching me, and I didn't register the warning until it was too late. I opened my front door and knew immediately that someone had been inside. It wasn't anything obvious, no ransacked drawers or overturned furniture, but there was a presence in the air, a disturbance in the energy of the space that set my newly awakened senses on edge. And then I stepped into my living room and saw them. My father stood in the center of the room like a general surveying a battlefield, his posture rigid with barely controlled fury. Around him, 4 men I recognized as his top executives, though their presence here, in my personal space, clearly indicated they were more than just business associates. These were the people my father trusted with his darkest secrets, his most questionable dealings, and they were looking at me like I was a problem to be solved rather than a person to be respected. The confrontation that followed was everything I described before, but what I didn't mention was the undercurrent of genuine fear I saw in my father's eyes. Not fear of me, exactly, but fear of what I represented, the uncontrollable, the unpredictable, The reminder that not everything in the world could be bought or manipulated or forced into neat categories. When he talked about my mother, when he finally revealed the truth about what had happened to her, I felt something break inside me. Not my spirit or my resolve, those had never been stronger, but rather, the last fragile thread of hope I'd been unconsciously holding on to. The childish wish that maybe, someday, my father and I could have a real relationship. That thread snapped, and in its place came clarity, cold and sharp and liberating. I didn't need his love or approval or validation. I never had. I was complete all on my own, and the family I was building with Demon, the family of choice rather than obligation, was worth 1,000 biological connections built on nothing but shared DNA and resentment. So when I walked out of that flat, when I left my father standing there with his hired muscle and his empty threats, I wasn't running away. I was walking toward something, toward the future I was choosing to create, toward the person I was choosing to become. Demon was waiting when I arrived at the estate, as if he'd somehow sensed I was in distress. He didn't ask questions, didn't push for explanations. He simply held me while I cried, offering comfort without trying to fix everything, understanding that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is just to be present with them in their pain. Later, when I'd calmed down enough to talk, I told him everything, about my mother, about my father's threats, about the confrontation and my decision to cut ties permanently. Through it all, Demon listened with that infinite patience of his amber eyes never leaving my face. "I'm proud of you," he said when I finished. "It takes enormous courage to walk away from family, even when they're toxic. Most people never manage it. They spend their entire lives seeking approval from people who will never give it, trying to earn love from those who aren't capable of providing it. You're free now, Serafina, truly free." "I don't feel free," I admitted. "I feel adrift. Like I've cut the anchor that was holding me in place, and now I don't know where I'll end up." "You'll end up exactly where you're meant to be," Demon assured me. "And you're not adrift. You're sailing toward new horizons. There's a difference. One implies being lost. The other implies being brave enough to explore uncharted waters." His words, as always, helped ground me, reminded me that I wasn't alone in this journey. But they also crystallized something that had been forming in the back of my mind for days, a possibility so enormous and terrifying that I'd been afraid to voice it out loud. "Demon," I said slowly, choosing my words carefully. "You've mentioned before that there's a ritual, a way for a human to become vampire. Is it possible? Could someone like me, with my particular heritage, undergo that transformation? And if so, what would happen?" He went very still, his entire body tensing in a way that told me this was not a casual question, not something to be discussed lightly. "It's possible," he said finally, his voice carefully neutral. "But it's never been attempted before. Not with someone of your bloodline. The magical power you carry might react unpredictably to vampiric transformation. You could become something unprecedented, or the conflicting energies could tear you apart. There's no way to know for certain what would happen. But there's a chance it could work," I pressed. "A chance we could be equals, partners in every sense. A chance I wouldn't have to grow old and die while you remain unchanged." "Serafina," he started, but I cut him off. "I've been thinking about this," I said urgently. "Maybe not consciously, but it's been there, lurking in the back of my mind. Every time we train together, every time I feel our powers resonating with each other, I wonder, what if we could truly merge? What if we could become something new, something that combines the best of both our natures?" Demon ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I'd learned meant he was deeply conflicted about something. "You're asking me to risk your life," he said quietly, "to potentially destroy you in pursuit of something that might not even be possible. How can I do that?" "Because I'm asking you to," I replied simply. "Because I trust you, and I believe in us. And I'm tired of living half a life when I know there's so much more possible. I've spent my entire existence being afraid of my father's disapproval, afraid of my own power, afraid of being too much or not enough. I'm done being afraid, Demon. I want to choose love, choose possibility, choose life, or whatever lies beyond life. I want to choose you fully and completely, for as long as forever lasts." The silence that followed my declaration stretched out, heavy with implications and unspoken fears. I watched emotions flicker across Demon's face: fear, hope, longing, doubt, as he grappled with what I was asking of him. Finally, he spoke, his voice rough with emotion. "If we do this," he said, "if we attempt this ritual, you need to understand that there's no going back. Success or failure, you will be fundamentally changed. Your human life, limited as it is, would be over. You would be stepping into an existence that most humans can't even imagine, taking on burdens and responsibilities that would crush lesser beings. Are you absolutely certain this is what you want?" I met his gaze steadily, letting him see the conviction in my eyes. "I have never been more certain of anything in my entire life," I said. "This feels right, Demon. In my bones, in my blood, in every fiber of my being, this is what I'm meant to do. We're meant to do this together." Something shifted in his expression then, the last of his resistance crumbling in the face of my certainty. 3 days, he said, echoing what I'd told you before. That's how long we'll need to prepare. And Serafina, he pulled me close, pressing his forehead against mine. Whatever happens, whatever we become, know that I love you. I have loved you from the moment I saw you standing in that gallery, trying so hard to be invisible when you were always meant to shine. I will love you through this transformation and beyond it, into whatever eternity awaits us. I love you too, I whispered back, forever and always. And so we began the preparations, 3 days that felt both endless and far too short. Demon gathered the materials we would need, ancient texts written in languages I couldn't read, ceremonial objects that hummed with power, ingredients for rituals that predated written history. He taught me the words I would need to speak, the gestures I would need to make, the mental states I would need to achieve. But more than the practical preparations, we talked. We shared everything, every hope, every fear, every secret we'd been holding on to. Demon told me about his human life, the man he'd been before his transformation, the dreams he'd had for a future that was stolen from him. I told him about the loneliness of my childhood, the countless nights I'd cried myself to sleep, wondering why I wasn't good enough for my own father to love. We built something in those 3 days, a foundation of understanding and trust and raw emotional honesty that would serve as the bedrock for whatever we were about to become. By the time the night of the full moon arrived, I felt ready, not unafraid, but ready to take the leap, to trust in our connection, to believe that love could be stronger than the forces trying to tear us apart. The ritual chamber felt different that night, charged with an energy that made my skin tingle and my power rise unbidden to the surface. Demon had spent hours preparing the space, drawing symbols and laying out objects in precise configurations. Every detail mattered, he'd explained. One mistake, one misplaced item, could mean the difference between transcendent success and catastrophic failure. We stood facing each other in the center of the circle, the candlelight casting our shadows on the ancient stone walls. Demon was dressed in simple black clothes, his dark hair loose around his shoulders, his amber eyes glowing with reflected firelight. He looked beautiful and dangerous and utterly otherworldly, and I felt my heart swell with love so intense it almost hurt. Last chance, he said softly. We can stop this right now. Continue as we are. I won't think less of you if you change your mind. But I didn't change my mind. I couldn't. This wasn't just about extending my lifespan or gaining more power. It was about becoming complete, about merging with the other half of my soul. I knew, with a certainty that transcended logic or reason, that this was my destiny, our destiny. I'm ready, I said, taking his hands in mine. Let's begin. The ritual unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance, each word and gesture building on the last, creating layers of power that filled the chamber until the very air seemed to shimmer with energy. We spoke in unison, our voices blending into a single harmonic that resonated with forces beyond mortal comprehension. I felt my power surge in response, felt it reaching out to twine with Demon's darkness, creating spirals of crimson and black that danced around us like living things. Then came the blood exchange, the moment when Demon took the ceremonial dagger and made the cuts across our palms. The pain was sharp but brief, quickly overwhelmed by the rush of sensation as our blood mingled. I felt his essence flood into me, centuries of life, of experience, of accumulated power, and I knew he was feeling the same from me, my magical heritage flowing into him, changing him, transforming him even as I was being transformed. The pain came next, sudden and overwhelming, like every nerve in my body was being set on fire. I heard myself scream, heard Demon's agonized cry join mine, but I couldn't stop, couldn't pull away even if I'd wanted to. We were caught in the ritual's grip now, swept up in forces far greater than ourselves. And all we could do was hold on and trust that we would emerge on the other side. I felt my body dying, felt my mortal life slipping away like water through my fingers. For a moment, there was nothing, no pain, no sensation, just endless dark void. And I thought maybe we'd failed, maybe this was the end. But then, slowly, sensation began to return, not the same as before, but different, heightened, more intense. I could feel everything, the rough stone beneath my feet, the movement of air across my skin, the beating of Demon's heart synchronized with my own. I opened my eyes, and the world had changed. Or rather, my perception of it had changed. I could see things I'd never noticed before, the minute details in the stone carvings on the walls, the individual particles of dust floating in the air, the complex patterns of energy that flowed through everything. My magical sight, which before had been like looking through a cloudy window, was now crystal clear. I could see the web of power that connected all things, could trace the lines of force that ran through the earth and sky. And Demon looked magnificent. His vampiric nature, which I'd always been able to sense but never fully perceive, was now visible to me as swirls of shadow and darkness that moved with predatory grace. But intertwined with that darkness was something new, threads of crimson light that pulsed in time with his heartbeat. My magic, now part of him, woven so deeply into his essence that there was no separating one from the other. I looked down at myself and saw similar changes. My power still burned crimson, but now it was shot through with veins of shadow that gave it depth and substance it had lacked before. I was no longer just a witch tapping into elemental forces. I was something new, something that had never existed before. We had succeeded. Against all odds, despite all the risks, we had merged our essences and created something unprecedented. We were neither vampire nor witch, but a perfect synthesis of both. A new species, a new possibility, a new kind of magic. The implications were staggering, but in that moment, all I could focus on was Demon. He was looking at me with an expression of such wonder and joy that it took my breath away. Slowly, reverently, he reached out and cupped my face in his hand. "You're beautiful," he whispered. "More beautiful than anything I've seen in 8 centuries. You're glowing, Seraphina, literally glowing with power and life and possibility." I covered his hands with mine, marveling at the sensation. His skin no longer felt cold to my enhanced senses, but rather perfectly matched to my own temperature, like we were 2 parts of the same whole. "We did it," I breathed. "We actually did it." "We did," he agreed, and then he was kissing me, and it was like nothing I'd ever experienced before. Every sensation was amplified 100-fold. The softness of his lips, the taste of him, the way our powers sparked and merged where our bodies touched. I felt like I was drowning in sensation, overwhelmed by the intensity of it all, but I never wanted it to stop. When we finally broke apart, we were both trembling, overwhelmed by the enormity of what we'd accomplished and what it meant for our future. We had literally become one in the most fundamental sense. Our powers were merged, our lives bound together for however long eternity lasted. There was no separating us now, no going back to being individuals who happened to be in love. We were partners in every sense, equals in power and devotion, fated to walk through the centuries together. The days that followed were a revelation, a constant discovery of new abilities and unexpected synergies. I found I could move with vampiric speed and strength, could sense the emotions and intentions of others with preternatural clarity. I no longer needed sleep, though I could still enjoy food and drink if I chose to. The sunlight, which Demon had always had to avoid, no longer burned me. My magical nature had tempered his vampiric vulnerability, allowing us both to walk in daylight without harm. Demon, conversely, found that my magic had given him capabilities he'd never possessed as a purely vampiric being. He could now manipulate the elements, create and destroy with a thought, tap into the same wellspring of power I'd been drawing from. The predatory hunger that had defined his existence for centuries was gentled by my life magic, making him capable of sustaining himself without killing, without causing harm. We were, in every sense, more than the sum of our parts, stronger together than we could ever have been separately, capable of things neither of us could have accomplished alone. It was exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. This knowledge that we had transcended the normal boundaries of existence and created something entirely new. But with that power came responsibility, and with that knowledge came questions. What would we do with these abilities? How would we navigate a world that wasn't prepared to accept what we'd become? And most pressingly, how would we protect ourselves from those who would seek to either control or destroy us? The answers to those questions would have to wait, because my father, true to his word, wasn't done with me yet. The confrontation at his estate, the one I described before, was the culmination of weeks of his plotting and scheming, his desperate attempts to regain control over a daughter who had finally slipped beyond his reach. But standing there in the courtyard, with his hired army arrayed against us, and his threats echoing in the cold morning air, I felt no fear. Instead, I felt pity for this man who had never learned that love couldn't be controlled, that people weren't assets to be managed, that some things were worth more than all the money and power in the world. We could have destroyed them all, Demon and I, with a thought, with a gesture. We could have leveled his entire force, could have shown him exactly what true power looked like, but we didn't. Because Demon was right. True strength isn't about domination or destruction. It's about choice. About having the power to destroy but choosing mercy instead. About being capable of terrible violence but choosing compassion. So we gave them all a chance to leave, to walk away and forget this ever happened. And one by one, they took it. Because even the most hardened mercenary knows better than to fight a battle they can't possibly win. They saw what we were, what we could do, and they chose survival over loyalty to a paycheck. My father left last, defeated and diminished. and I watched him go with surprisingly little emotion. The man who had dominated my thoughts and shaped my choices for 23 years had become irrelevant in the span of a few weeks. He no longer had the power to hurt me, to make me feel small or inadequate or wrong. I had outgrown him, outgrown the need for his approval or validation. I was free, truly, finally, completely free. And that freedom was more intoxicating than any power, more valuable than any wealth, more profound than any transformation. I had claimed my own destiny, chosen my own path, and I would never again let anyone, not my father, not society, not fate itself, tell me who I was supposed to be. Demon wrapped his arms around me as my father disappeared from view, and I leaned into him, grateful for his strength, for his love, for his unwavering belief in my worth. Together, we had accomplished the impossible. Together, we would build a future neither of us could have imagined alone. The sun rose higher, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, and for the first time in my life, I felt complete. Not because I had gained power or found love or escaped my father's control, but because I had finally discovered who I truly was. I had faced my fears, embraced my nature, and chosen to become the architect of my own destiny. And that, more than anything else, made me invincible.